The warehouse door swung open and Dylan Cross saw what would destroy him. 17 women, chained, barely breathing. Their eyes hollow, their bodies broken by men who saw them as cargo, not human beings. He raised his camera, one click, then another. That's when the footsteps came. Dylan turned. 3 men, guns drawn, no badges, no mercy. He ran. This is the story of a reporter who chased the truth into the darkest corners of the city and found a war no one else dared to fight. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button. Drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. The rain didn't stop in Greyport. It never did. It fell in sheets, relentless and cold, hammering the cracked pavement and turning the streets into rivers of filth. The city wore its weather like a second skin. Gray skies, gray buildings, gray people trudging through gray lives. Even the harbor looked bruised, its waters churning dark and oily beneath the skeletal cranes that clawed at the sky. Dylan Cross stood at the edge of the wharf, collar turned up against the downpour, watching a cargo ship disappear into the fog. His notebook was already soaked, ink bleeding across the pages, but he kept writing anyway. Notes, questions, names that didn't add up. He'd been chasing this story for 6 months. 6 months of dead ends, slammed doors, and sources who vanished before they could talk. 6 months of editors telling him to drop it, police telling him there was nothing there, and friends telling him he was losing his mind. But Dylan knew better, because the pattern was real. Young women, service workers, waitresses, hotel maids, bartenders, people on the margins, people no one noticed until they were gone. All of them had received the same offer: a better job, better pay, a way out of the grind. All of them had vanished within days. The police called them runaways. Case closed. Dylan called them victims. He flipped back through his notes, scanning the names he'd collected. 18 disappearances in the past year. 18 women who'd left behind debts, boyfriends, apartments still half furnished. 18 women who'd walked into the fog and never walked back out. And all of them had one thing in common. They'd been working near the port. Dylan's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, shielding the screen from the rain. Unknown number. He answered, "Cross." Silence. Then a voice. Female, young, terrified. "You're the reporter, right? The one asking about the missing girls?" Dylan's pulse quickened. "Yeah, that's me." "Who is this?" "I can't tell you my name," her voice cracked, "but I know what happened to them. I know where they went." "Where?" "There's a warehouse. Near the old cannery. They take them there. She stopped. Dylan heard voices in the background, shouting, a door slamming. "Hello? Are you still there? I have to go. I shouldn't have called. The line went dead. Dylan stared at the phone, rain streaming down his face. His hands were shaking. Not from the cold, from the adrenaline. This was it. This was the break he'd been waiting for. He pocketed the phone, grabbed his camera bag, and headed for his car. The old cannery sat at the edge of the industrial district, a rusted monument to Greyport's dying economy. Decades ago, it had processed thousands of tons of fish every day. Now it was just another corpse rotting by the water, its windows shattered, its walls covered in graffiti. But the warehouse next to it was different. Newer, cleaner, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Security cameras mounted at every corner. No signage, no markings. Just a blank concrete box sitting in the middle of nowhere. Dylan parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, keeping to the shadows. The rain was still falling, harder now, turning the gravel lot into a lake of mud. He could hear the ocean roaring in the distance, waves slamming against the breakwater like fists. He crouched behind a dumpster, pulling his camera from the bag. Long lens, high ISO. He adjusted the settings, zoomed in, and started shooting. The warehouse was quiet. No lights, no movement, just the hum of a generator somewhere inside. Then a door opened. 2 men stepped out, both wearing black jackets and baseball caps. One of them lit a cigarette, the orange glow briefly illuminating his face. Dylan zoomed in, snapping photos rapid fire. The second man pulled out a phone, said something Dylan couldn't hear, then gestured toward the far end of the lot. A van appeared, white. No windows, no plates. Dylan's stomach tightened. The van pulled up to the loading dock. The rear doors opened. The 2 men climbed inside, and then they started dragging women out. Dylan's breath caught. They were young, disheveled, moving like sleepwalkers, their eyes glazed, their bodies limp. Some of them stumbled. Others had to be carried. Drugged, Dylan realized. They've been drugged. He kept shooting. Click, click, click. The shutter sounded deafening in the silence, but the rain covered it. The men didn't look up. One by one, the women were led into the warehouse. 17 of them. Dylan counted. 17. The last one collapsed halfway to the door. One of the men cursed, grabbed her by the arm, and hauled her inside. The door slammed shut. Dylan lowered the camera, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. He'd found them. He'd actually found them. But now what? He couldn't call the police. Not yet. He needed more evidence. Photos weren't enough. He needed proof. Names, dates, connections. He needed something that would force them to act. He needed to get closer. Dylan crept forward, moving along the fence line, staying low. The mud sucked at his boots. The rain hammered his back. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to get the hell out of there, but he ignored it. He reached the corner of the fence and peered through a gap in the chain link. The loading dock was empty now. The van was gone. But the generator was still running, and through a cracked window, Dylan could see lights inside. He pulled out his phone, switching it to video mode, and angled it through the gap. The footage was grainy, barely visible through the rain and darkness, but it was something. Then he heard voices. Dylan froze. 2 men coming around the side of the building. One of them was talking on a radio. "Yeah, the shipment's in. We'll move them tomorrow night. Boss wants everything clean. No screw-ups this time." Dylan's blood turned to ice. He was too close. Way too close. He started backing away, moving as quietly as he could, but his boot caught on something, a piece of rebar, and he stumbled. The noise was small, barely a scrape. But it was enough. One of the men turned, looked right at him. "Hey, who's there?" Dylan ran. He didn't think, didn't plan, just bolted across the lot, legs pumping, lungs burning, the camera bag slamming against his side. Behind him, he heard shouting. Footsteps. A dog barking. He hit the fence, scrambling over it, razor wire tearing at his jacket. He dropped to the other side, landing hard, pain shooting up his ankle. "Get him!" Dylan limped forward, pushing through the pain, weaving between shipping containers and piles of scrap metal. The rain was blinding now, turning the world into a wet blur. He reached his car, fumbled with the keys, and threw himself inside. The engine roared to life. Tires screeched as he peeled out, fishtailing through the mud. In the rearview mirror, he saw headlights. They were following him. Dylan floored it, heart racing, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. He took a hard left, then another, weaving through side streets and alleys, trying to lose them. The headlights stayed close. He ran a red light. Horns blared. Someone screamed. He didn't stop. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the headlights fell back, disappeared. Dylan pulled into a parking garage, killed the engine, and sat there in the dark, shaking. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. He stared at it for a long moment, then answered, "Dylan Cross?" The voice was male, calm, almost amused. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows you were just at the warehouse, someone who knows what you saw." Dylan's throat tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play stupid. You've been asking questions for months, digging where you shouldn't. You think you're helping those girls? You're not. You're making it worse." "Then help me stop it." The man laughed. "You don't stop people like us, Mr. Cross. You just get in the way. And people who get in the way disappear." The line went dead. Dylan sat there staring at the phone, the weight of it crushing. He'd crossed a line tonight, stepped into something bigger than he'd realized. And now they knew who he was. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when 17 women were counting on him. The next morning, Dylan went straight to his editor's office. Marcus Chen was a 20-year veteran of the Grayport Herald, a man who'd seen every story, broken every rule, and survived every purge. He looked like a bulldog, short, stocky, with a face that seemed permanently set in a scowl. But Dylan trusted him more than anyone. "You look like hell," Marcus said, not looking up from his computer. "I found them." Marcus stopped typing, looked up. "Found who?" "The missing women. All of them. They're being held in a warehouse near the old cannery. I got photos, video, everything. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Dylan with sharp, calculating eyes. You're sure? I saw them with my own eyes. 17 women, drugged, being moved like cargo. Did you call the police? Not yet. Why not? Because I don't know who to trust. The cops have been ignoring this for months. Either they're incompetent or they're involved. Marcus frowned. That's a serious accusation. I'm serious. Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. Show me what you've got. Dylan pulled out his laptop, opened the files, and showed him everything. The photos, the video, the list of names and dates he'd compiled over the past 6 months. Marcus watched in silence, his expression unreadable. When it was over, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. This is big, Dylan. Bigger than you think. If you're right, and this is a trafficking network, then you're not just dealing with criminals. You're dealing with people who have money, power, connections, people who can make you disappear. I know. Do you? Because once you publish this, there's no going back. Your life will change. You'll be a target. I'm already a target. They called me last night. Threatened me. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What did they say? That I was making it worse. That people who get in the way disappear. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, we'll run it. But we do it smart. We need corroboration. Witnesses. Evidence that'll hold up in court. And we need to loop in the feds. If the local cops are dirty, we go over their heads. How long will that take? A week, maybe 2. We don't have 2 weeks. They're moving the women tomorrow night. Marcus cursed under his breath. Then we move faster. But Dylan, he leaned forward, his voice low and hard. If you screw this up, if you get yourself killed chasing this story, it's on you, not me, not the paper, you. Understand? Dylan nodded. I understand. Good. Now get out of here. Start making calls. I'll reach out to my contact at the FBI. We'll see if we can fast-track this. Dylan stood, grabbed his bag, and headed for the door. But before he left, Marcus called out, Dylan! He turned. Be careful. These people don't play games. Neither do I. Dylan spent the rest of the day chasing leads. He called every contact he had, activists, social workers, legal aid lawyers. He showed them the photos, told them the story, begged them for help. Most of them were horrified. A few promised to make calls, but no one had answers. By evening, he was exhausted, frustrated, running on fumes. He was sitting in his apartment, staring at his laptop, when his phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Dylan Cross? A woman's voice, different from the first caller, older, steadier. Yeah, who's this? My name is Elena. I'm a friend of Maria Cortez. You've been asking about her. Dylan sat up straight. Maria Cortez, 22 years old, waitress, disappeared 3 months ago. I have been. Do you know where she is? No, but I know what happened to her. And I know you're in danger. What do you mean? The people you're investigating, they know you're getting close. They're planning something. I don't know what. But you need to be careful. How do you know this? Because I used to work for them. Dylan's pulse quickened. Will you meet me? Tell me everything? There was a long pause. Then, tomorrow, 6 p.m. Luciano's restaurant, downtown. Come alone. If I see anyone else, I'm gone. I'll be there. The line went dead. Dylan sat back, his mind racing. This was it. The witness he needed. The break that could blow the whole thing open. But it was also a risk, a huge one. If this was a trap, he was walking right into it. But he didn't have a choice. Tomorrow at 6, he'd be at Luciano's, and he'd finally get the truth. Luciano's was an upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of downtown Grayport, the kind of place where politicians made deals and CEOs closed contracts. White tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, a pianist playing soft jazz in the corner. Dylan arrived at 5:45, 15 minutes early. He took a table near the back, facing the entrance, and ordered a coffee he didn't drink. He checked his phone. No messages. He checked the time. 5:52. His leg bounced under the table. His palms were sweating. At 5:58, the door opened. A woman walked in, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a long coat and sunglasses despite the dim lighting. She scanned the room, saw Dylan, hesitated. Then she walked over. "Dylan Cross? Elena?" She nodded, slipping into the seat across from him. She didn't take off her sunglasses. "Thank you for meeting me," Dylan said. "I almost didn't come." "Why did you?" "Because Maria was my friend, and because what they're doing, it has to stop." Dylan leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Elena glanced around the restaurant, her shoulders tight with tension. Then she began. "I worked for them for 2 years, not by choice. They recruited me the same way they recruit everyone, with promises. A good job, good money, a way out of poverty. I believed them. I was desperate." "What did they make you do?" "At first, just cleaning, cooking, keeping the girls comfortable. I didn't know what was really happening. I thought it was a boarding house, a safe place. But then I started noticing things. The locks on the doors, the men who came and went, the way the girls looked, broken, terrified." "How many girls?" "It changed, sometimes 5, sometimes 20. They moved them every few weeks, different locations, different cities. I never knew where they went after they left." "And Maria?" Elena's voice cracked. "She came in 3 months ago. She was so young, so scared. She kept asking for her mother. I tried to help her, tried to sneak her food, give her clean clothes. But they caught me, beat me, told me if I ever tried again, they'd kill me." "Did you see who was in charge?" "There was a man. They called him Vargas. He ran everything, gave the orders, collected the money. He was ruthless, cold. If a girl tried to run, he'd make an example of her. I saw him—" She stopped, her hands trembling. "I saw him kill a girl once. Just shot her, like it was nothing." Dylan felt sick. "Do you know where Vargas is now?" "No, but I know he's still operating, still moving girls. And I know he has connections, police, politicians, people who protect him." "Will you testify? Go on record?" Elena shook her head. "I can't. If I do, I'm dead. You don't understand. These people don't forgive. They don't forget." "Then why are you here?" "Because I want you to stop them. I want someone to finally do something." Dylan reached across the table, his voice urgent. "I will. I promise. But I need your help. I need names, locations, anything you can give me." Elena opened her mouth to respond. And then the restaurant exploded into chaos. The front door burst open. 4 men stormed in, dressed in black, faces covered, guns drawn. Someone screamed. The pianist stopped playing. Dylan's blood turned to ice. "Get down!" one of the men shouted. Patrons dove under tables. A waiter dropped a tray, glass shattering across the floor. But the men weren't there for them. They were there for Elena. One of them pointed straight at her. "You! Don't move!" Elena's face went white. "No, no, no, no!" She bolted. The men opened fire. Dylan threw himself to the ground as bullets ripped through the air, splintering wood, shattering mirrors. People were screaming, running, trampling over each other in their panic. Dylan crawled under the table, his ears ringing, his heart hammering. He looked up just in time to see Elena stumbling toward the kitchen, blood blooming across her shoulder. "Elena!" She didn't stop. She crashed through the kitchen doors and disappeared. The gunmen followed. Dylan scrambled to his feet and ran after them. He burst into the kitchen. Chaos, cooks shouting, pots crashing. He saw Elena ahead, limping toward the back exit, and he saw the gunmen closing in. "Elena, run!" She reached for the door, and a figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive suit. He moved so fast Dylan almost didn't see it. One moment, the gunmen were advancing. The next, the first one was on the ground, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle, his gun clattering away. The second lunged. The man in the suit sidestepped, drove an elbow into his ribs, then slammed his head into the stainless steel counter. The third raised his weapon. The man caught his wrist, twisted, and drove a knee into his stomach. The gunman crumpled. The fourth turned to run. The man pulled a pistol from his jacket and fired once. The shot echoed. The gunman dropped. Silence. Dylan stood frozen, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The man in the suit turned. and Dylan saw his face, sharp features, cold gray eyes, a scar running along his jawline. "You must be Dylan Cross," the man said calmly, as if he hadn't just taken down 4 armed men in less than 30 seconds. Dylan couldn't speak. The man holstered his weapon and gestured toward Elena, who was slumped against the wall, clutching her shoulder. "Get her to a hospital, now." Who are you?" The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Adrian Vale, and we need to talk." The hospital smell hit Dylan the moment they pushed through the emergency room doors, antiseptic and bleach and something underneath that might have been fear. Elena was barely conscious, her face the color of old paper, blood soaking through the makeshift bandage Adrian had wrapped around her shoulder in the car. "Gunshot wound," Adrian said to the nurse at the desk, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people move without questioning. "Through and through. She's lost a lot of blood." The nurse's eyes widened. She grabbed a phone, barked orders Dylan couldn't process, and within seconds a gurney appeared. They lifted Elena onto it, her head lolling to one side. "Maria," she whispered, reaching for Dylan's hand. "Find Maria, please." "I will," Dylan said, squeezing her fingers. "I promise." Then they wheeled her away through double doors that swung shut with a finality that made Dylan's stomach turn. He stood there in the harsh fluorescent lighting, his clothes splattered with Elena's blood, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline crash. Around him, the emergency room hummed with controlled chaos, a child crying somewhere, machines beeping, someone shouting for a doctor. "Come on," Adrian said, his hand on Dylan's elbow. "We need to leave before the police arrive." Dylan pulled away. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't even know who you are." "Yes, you do. You're a reporter. You've done your research. You know exactly who I am." And Dylan did. The name had clicked the moment Adrian said it. Adrian Vale, one of the most powerful men in Greyport's underworld. A crime lord who controlled everything from gambling to protection rackets, who'd built an empire on the backs of broken laws and broken people. "Why did you help us?" Dylan asked. "Because those men weren't after you. They were after something that belongs to me." "Elena doesn't belong to anyone." Adrian's smile was thin and cold. "I meant my territory. Greyport is mine, Mr. Cross. Has been for 15 years. And when someone else starts operating trafficking rings in my city without my permission, it becomes my problem. You're no better than they are." "You're right, I'm worse, but I have rules. And one of them is that women and children are off limits. Vargas and his cartel broke that rule. So now they're going to pay." Dylan stared at him, trying to reconcile the man who'd just saved their lives with the criminal he knew Adrian to be. Nothing about this made sense. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to help me destroy them. I don't work with criminals. You already are. The moment you stepped into that warehouse, you became part of this. The moment Elena called you, you crossed the line. Now you have a choice. Work with me and save those 17 women, or stand on principle while they disappear forever." Dylan's jaw clenched. He wanted to tell Adrian to go to hell, wanted to walk out of that hospital and call the FBI and do this the right way. But Elena's voice echoed in his head. "Maria. Find Maria. How many more Marias were out there? How many more women were counting down the hours until they were moved, sold, lost?" "What do you want from me?" Dylan asked. "Information. You've been tracking these disappearances for months. You have names, dates, patterns. I need everything you know." "And what do I get in return?" "A story that'll win you every journalism award ever created, and the satisfaction of knowing you actually saved lives instead of just writing about them after the fact." Dylan felt the weight of that choice settling over him like a lead blanket. Everything he'd believed in, truth, justice, the system, was being tested in this moment. And he knew, somewhere deep in his gut, that if he said yes, there would be no going back. But he'd already seen those women, already heard Elena's confession, already looked into the face of evil and barely escaped. If he walked away now, he'd spend the rest of his life wondering what happened to them. "Fine," Dylan said. "But we do this my way. No killing unless absolutely necessary. And when it's over, I publish everything, including your part in it." Adrian extended his hand. "Deal." Dylan hesitated, then shook it. The man's grip was iron. "There's a car waiting outside," Adrian said. We need to move." Those men at the restaurant won't be the last ones Vargas sends. They left through a side exit, avoiding the main entrance where police cars were already pulling up, lights flashing. Adrian's car was a black Mercedes, sleek and expensive, idling at the curb. A driver sat behind the wheel, stone-faced and silent. They climbed into the back. The leather seats smelled like money. "Where are we going?" Dylan asked as the car pulled away from the hospital. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk without interruption." They drove through the rain-slicked streets of Grayport, leaving the downtown core behind and heading toward the waterfront. The buildings grew older, more decrepit. Warehouses and shipping yards loomed in the darkness like the ruins of some ancient civilization. Finally, they turned down an unmarked street and pulled up to what looked like an abandoned factory. But when Adrian opened the door, Dylan saw it was anything but abandoned. The interior had been transformed into something between a fortress and a luxury penthouse. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings with industrial lighting, leather furniture arranged around a massive oak desk. Men in suits stood at strategic points throughout the space. Guards, Dylan realized, all of them armed. "Sit," Adrian said, gesturing to a chair across from the desk. Dylan sat. Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter and handed one to Dylan. "I don't drink on the job." "You're not on the job anymore. You're at war. And war requires different rules." Dylan took the glass but didn't drink. Adrian sat down, studying Dylan with those cold gray eyes. "Tell me everything you know about Vargas and his operation." Dylan pulled out his phone, opened his notes, and began. He told Adrian about the pattern of disappearances, the women who'd all received job offers, the surveillance gaps around the times they'd vanished. He showed him the photos from the warehouse, the video footage, the list of names. Adrian listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Dylan finished, Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Vargas is part of the Sinaloa cartel. They've been trying to expand into human trafficking for the past 2 years, using West Coast ports as distribution points. Grayport was supposed to be neutral territory, but apparently they decided to test the waters." "How do you know all this?" "Because I make it my business to know everything that happens in this city. Every deal, every shipment, every power play. Information is currency, Mr. Cross, and I'm very rich." "If you knew about this, why didn't you stop it sooner?" "Because I needed proof. I needed to know the full scope of their operation before I moved. If I'd acted too soon, they would have scattered, moved their operation elsewhere, and those women would have disappeared anyway. But now, thanks to you, I have what I need." Dylan's stomach turned. "You used me." "We're using each other. Don't pretend you're a saint in this. You wanted the story. I gave you access to it. Now we both get what we want." "And the women? What happens to them?" "We get them out, tomorrow night before Vargas moves them. But we need to move fast. He knows you were at the warehouse. He knows Elena talked. He'll accelerate his timeline. How do we stop him?" Adrian stood, walked to a large map of Grayport pinned to the wall. Red markers dotted various locations, warehouses, shipping yards, known cartel safe houses. "Vargas is smart. He knows I'll come for him. So he'll have heavy security at the warehouse. Maybe 20 men, all armed. We can't just walk in and take the women. We need a strategy." "What kind of strategy?" "Two-pronged attack. I hit the warehouse with my people, create chaos, draw their attention. Meanwhile, you work with the FBI to coordinate a raid. Federal agents storm the place while we provide the distraction. By the time Vargas realizes what's happening, it's too late." "You want me to bring the feds into this?" "I want those women safe. I don't care who gets the credit. Do you?" Dylan thought about Elena bleeding out in the restaurant, about Maria Cortez asking for her mother, about 17 women chained in that warehouse waiting for someone to save them. "No," he said, "I don't." "Good. Then make the call. Tell your editor to contact his FBI source. Tell them everything, except my involvement. As far as they're concerned, you got an anonymous tip about the location and the timing. They'll want more than that. They'll want evidence." Adrian slid a USB drive across the desk. "Security footage from the warehouse, recorded 2 days ago, shows Vargas personally overseeing the operation. That should be enough to get a warrant." Dylan picked up the drive, turning it over in his fingers. "Where did you get this?" "I told you. Information is currency." Dylan pocketed the drive and pulled out his phone. It was nearly midnight, but he knew Marcus would answer. Marcus picked up on the second ring. This better be good. It is. I have footage of the trafficking operation. Clear evidence. I need you to get it to the FBI tonight. Tonight? Dylan, do you know what time it is? Marcus, they're moving the women tomorrow night. If we don't act now, they're gone forever. Please. There was a long pause, then Marcus sighed. Send me the file. I'll make the call. I need you to do more than that. I need you to set up a meeting tomorrow morning, early. The FBI needs to coordinate a raid for tomorrow night. You're asking for a lot. I know, but this is it, Marcus. This is the story that matters. This is the one that saves lives. Another pause. Okay, I'll make it happen. But Dylan, be careful. These people will kill you if they get the chance. I know. Dylan hung up and looked at Adrian. It's done. The FBI will coordinate the raid, but I need details, exact timing, layout of the warehouse, how many guards, everything. Adrian smiled. Follow me. They moved to a side room where a large table held blueprints of the warehouse district. Adrian spread them out, pointing to various sections. The warehouse has 3 entrances, main loading dock, side door here, and a service entrance in the back. Vargas will have men at each one, probably snipers on the roof. The women will be held in the basement level, locked in shipping containers. Shipping containers? It's how they transport them. Pack them in like cargo, drug them to keep them quiet, then move them to the next location. Efficient. Brutal. Dylan felt sick again. Adrian continued. My team will hit the main entrance at exactly 9 p.m. That's when the guards change shifts. There'll be confusion, a gap in their security. That's when the FBI needs to come in through the back. Hard and fast. No warning. What about Vargas? He'll be there. He always oversees the big moves. And when he shows up, I'll be waiting. I thought you said no killing. I said no unnecessary killing. Vargas is very necessary. Dylan met Adrian's eyes. There was no mercy there. No hesitation. This was a man who'd built his empire on violence, and he wasn't about to change now. I need to be there, Dylan said. Absolutely not. I'm the one who found them. I'm the one who's been chasing this story for 6 months. I deserve to see it through. You'll get yourself killed. Then protect me. You said yourself we're working together. I'm not asking to go in guns blazing. I just want to document what happens. The world needs to see this. Adrian studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fine, but you stay behind my people. You don't engage. You don't play hero. You point your camera and you shoot. That's it. Understood? Understood. Good. Now go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Dylan stood to leave, but Adrian called out, Mr. Cross. He turned. What you're doing, it's brave, stupid, but brave. Most people would have walked away by now, run back to the safety of their newsroom and let someone else handle the dirty work. But you didn't. That means something. It means I can't live with myself if I don't try. Adrian nodded. That's the difference between people like you and people like me. You still believe in something. I stopped believing a long time ago. Dylan didn't know what to say to that, so he just left. The driver took him back to his apartment. It was nearly 2 a.m. by the time he climbed the stairs and unlocked his door. The place was exactly as he'd left it, messy, cluttered with research, the faint smell of old coffee and takeout containers. He dropped his bag, peeled off his blood-stained clothes, and stood under the shower until the water ran cold. But no amount of scrubbing could wash away what he'd seen, what he'd become part of. He thought about calling his sister, hearing her voice, reminding himself that there was still good in the world. But it was too late. And what would he even say? Hey, Jenna, just partnered with a crime lord to take down a human trafficking ring. How was your day? Instead, he dried off, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. All he could see were those 17 women. All he could hear were Elena's words. Find Maria. Tomorrow night, he'd keep that promise. Or die trying. The meeting with the FBI took place at 7 a.m. in a downtown federal building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. All concrete and glass, no warmth, no humanity. Just cold bureaucratic efficiency. Dylan met Marcus in the lobby. His editor looked like he hadn't slept either. His eyes bloodshot, his tie loosened. They're waiting upstairs. Marcus said. And they're not happy about being dragged out of bed at 5 in the morning. They'll get over it when they see what we have. They took the elevator to the 8th floor and were escorted into a conference room. 3 agents sat around a table, 2 men and a woman. The woman stood as they entered. Mr. Cross, I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen. This is Agent Rivera and Agent DeMarco. We understand you have information about a trafficking operation. Dylan shook her hand. She had a firm grip and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I do. And I have evidence. He connected his laptop to the projector and pulled up the security footage from Adrian's USB drive. The agents watched in silence as the video played. Vargas supervising the unloading of the van, the women being dragged into the warehouse, the cold efficiency of it all. When it ended, Agent Chen sat back. Where did you get this? An anonymous source. We'll need more than that. I'm a journalist. I protect my sources. But I can give you everything else, the location, the timeline, the number of victims. They're moving the women tonight at 9 p.m. If you don't act now, they'll disappear. Agent Rivera leaned forward. You're asking us to mobilize a raid based on footage from an unknown source and the word of a reporter who's been, investigating this on his own for 6 months? No offense, but that's not how this works. Then how does it work? Dylan's voice was harder than he intended. You wait until you have every piece of paperwork filed, every regulation followed, while 17 women get sold into slavery? We follow protocol, Rivera shot back. We build cases that hold up in court. We don't go off half-cocked because a journalist has a hunch. It's not a hunch. It's evidence. Right there on that screen. Agent Chen held up a hand. Gentlemen, let's all take a breath. She turned to Dylan. Mr. Cross, I understand your urgency, and I appreciate what you're trying to do, but Agent Rivera has a point. We need more than this video to justify a raid. We need corroboration, witnesses, a chain of custody for the evidence. I have a witness. Elena Martinez. She worked inside the operation for 2 years. She's at Mercy General right now, recovering from a gunshot wound she got because she agreed to meet with me. That got their attention. She was shot? Agent Chen asked. Last night, at Luciano's restaurant, cartel gunmen tried to kill her. She survived, and she's willing to talk. The agents exchanged glances. We'll need to interview her, Agent Chen said, and we'll need the original source of this video. If you can provide both, we can move forward. Dylan's mind raced. He couldn't give them Adrian. That wasn't the deal. But he needed them to act. I can't reveal my source, but I can give you Elena, and I can give you something else. He pulled out his phone, showed them the photos he'd taken at the warehouse. I was there 3 nights ago. I saw them loading the women. I have documentation, timestamps, GPS coordinates, everything you need. Agent Chen studied the photos. Then she looked at Marcus. You're willing to stake your newspaper's reputation on this? Marcus nodded. I am. She turned back to Dylan. If we do this, if we mobilize a tactical team for tonight, and it turns out to be a dead end, your career is over. You understand that? Yes. And if anyone gets hurt because of bad intelligence, you'll be held responsible. I understand. Agent Chen stood. Then we move. Rivera DeMarco, start assembling the team. I want tactical, medical, and transport ready to deploy by 8 p.m. Mr. Cross, you stay available. If we have questions, you answer. Immediately. Clear? Clear. The agents filed out, already on their phones, already moving with the kind of focused intensity that made Dylan believe this might actually work. Marcus turned to him. You just bet everything on this. I hope to hell you're right. So do I. They left the federal building and stood on the sidewalk, the morning sun breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. The rain had stopped. The city looked almost clean. What now? Marcus asked. Now I go back to the hospital. Check on Elena, make sure she's safe. And tonight? Tonight I'm going to be at that warehouse, one way or another. Marcus grabbed his arm. Dylan, you can't. If the FBI finds out you're there, they'll shut the whole thing down. And if the cartel finds you, they'll kill you. I have to be there. I have to see this through. Why? You've done your part. You brought the story to the FBI. Let them handle it. Because I promised Elena I'd find Maria. Because those women deserve to have someone witness what happens to them. Because if I'm not there, it's just another operation, another statistic. But if I'm there, if I document it, it becomes real. It becomes a story people can't ignore. Marcus sighed. You're going to get yourself killed. You know that? Maybe, but at least I'll die doing something that matters. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Dylan smiled. Probably. They parted ways. Marcus headed back to the newspaper. Dylan went to the hospital. Elena was awake when he arrived, propped up in bed, her shoulder heavily bandaged. She looked small and fragile against the white sheets, but her eyes were clear. You came, she said. I promised I would. How are you feeling? Like I got shot. She tried to smile but winced. The doctors say I'll be okay. The bullet went through clean, no permanent damage. Good. That's good. Dylan pulled up a chair beside the bed. Elena, the FBI is going to want to talk to you. They're planning a raid tonight, but they need your testimony to make it official. Fear flickered across her face. If I testify, Vargas will find me. He'll kill me. The FBI will protect you. Witness protection, a new identity, a new life, but you have to trust them. I don't trust anyone anymore. I know, but this is your chance to stop them, to make sure what happened to you and Maria doesn't happen to anyone else. Elena was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll talk to them. For Maria. Thank you. Dylan stayed with her until Agent Chen arrived 2 hours later. He watched through the window as Elena gave her statement, saw the tears on her face as she relived the horrors she'd witnessed. When it was done, Agent Chen came out looking grim. We have enough, she said. The raid is a go, 9 p.m. And Mr. Cross, thank you. What you did, bringing this to us, it matters. But you need to stay away from the warehouse tonight. This is a federal operation now. We can't have civilians in the line of fire. I understand, but he had no intention of staying away. At 8 p.m., Dylan met Adrian at the factory-turned-fortress. The place was buzzing with activity. Men loading weapons, checking equipment, speaking in low, urgent voices. Adrian was at the center of it all, directing his people with the precision of a military commander. You ready? He asked when he saw Dylan. As ready as I'll ever be. Adrian handed him a bulletproof vest. Put this on, and stay close to Marcus. Marcus? A big man stepped forward, 6'4", solid muscle, with a scar running down the left side of his face. I'm Marcus. I'll be your shadow tonight. Where you go, I go. What you see, I see. And if things go sideways, I get you out. Got it? Dylan nodded. Got it. Adrian checked his watch. 30 minutes until go time. Let's move. They piled into 3 black SUVs and drove toward the warehouse district. The sun had set, leaving the city wrapped in darkness. Rain was starting again, light but steady, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected the streetlights. Dylan's heart was pounding. His hands were sweating. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to let the professionals handle this. But he didn't, because somewhere in that warehouse, 17 women were counting on him, and he wasn't about to let them down. The SUVs parked 2 blocks away, hidden in the shadows between shipping containers. Adrian's team moved out silently, spreading into position. Marcus stayed at Dylan's side, one hand on his shoulder. Remember, Marcus whispered, you're here to observe, not to fight. You see trouble, you run. I'll cover you. Dylan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He pulled out his camera, adjusted the settings for low light, and started shooting. Through the viewfinder, he could see the warehouse, lights on inside, shadows moving behind the windows, guards patrolling the perimeter. Adrian's voice crackled through the radio Marcus carried. Team 1 in position. Team 2 in position. FBI, what's your status? A pause. Then Agent Chen's voice. We're 30 seconds out. On my mark. Dylan's pulse hammered in his ears. Mark. And then all hell broke loose. That had to be enough. But 3 days later, Dylan discovered it wasn't enough at all. He was sitting in his apartment reviewing footage from the warehouse raid for the 100th time when his phone rang. The number was blocked, but something told him to answer. Mr. Cross. The voice was distorted, mechanical, impossible to identify. You think you won. You think because Vargas is dead and 17 women are safe that this is over. It's not. Dylan's grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? Someone who wants you to understand what you've done. You didn't dismantle a trafficking network. You poked a hornet's nest. And now the hornets are coming for everyone you care about. If you're trying to scare me, I'm trying to warn you. Elena Martinez, Maria Cortez. Every woman you helped rescue, every source who talked to you, every person who trusted you to keep them safe, they're all targets now, and their blood will be on your hands. The line went dead. Dylan sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his mind racing. It could be a bluff, a psychological tactic designed to make him paranoid, to break him down. But what if it wasn't? He called Marcus immediately. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves death threats against the survivors. I just got a call. Someone's planning retaliation. Marcus was silent for a moment. Come to the office. Now. And Dylan, watch your back on the way over. If they're serious about this, you're the primary target. Dylan grabbed his jacket and camera bag, checking the street from his window before leaving. Nothing looked suspicious, but that didn't mean anything. Professional killers didn't advertise their presence. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, emerged through a side entrance, and caught a cab 3 blocks away. The entire ride to the Herald, he watched the cars behind them, looking for patterns, for anyone following too closely. Marcus was waiting with Agent Chen when Dylan arrived. Her presence told him everything he needed to know. This was already official. We intercepted communications this morning, Chen said without preamble. Encrypted messages between cartel cells discussing retaliation. They're planning coordinated strikes against everyone connected to the warehouse operation. Witnesses, survivors, law enforcement. And you're at the top of the list. Dylan's stomach turned. When? We don't know. Could be days. Could be weeks. But they're moving resources into position. We've already placed protective details on the survivors we know about. But Mr. Cross, there are people connected to this case that we can't protect. Sources who remained anonymous. People you interviewed off the record. Dylan thought about the dozens of conversations he'd had over the past 6 months. The bartenders and social workers and street-level informants who'd given him pieces of the puzzle. People who'd trusted him to keep them safe. What do you need from me? He asked. A list. Everyone who helped you with this story. Everyone who might be at risk. We'll do what we can to protect them. And what about Dylan? Marcus cut in. What's the plan to keep him alive? We're offering protective custody. Safe house, 24-hour security, complete isolation until we can neutralize the threat. Dylan shook his head. No, I can't hide while everyone else is exposed. I started this. I need to see it through. That's not heroic, Mr. Cross. That's suicidal. Maybe. But it's my choice. Chen's jaw tightened. Fine. Then at minimum, you accept a security detail. 2 agents, armed, with you at all times. And you don't go anywhere without clearing it with us first. Deal? Dylan wanted to argue, wanted to maintain his independence, but he knew she was right. He couldn't help anyone if he was dead. Deal. The security detail arrived an hour later. 2 agents named Morrison and Keller, both former military, both carrying themselves with the alert efficiency of people who'd seen combat. They moved into Dylan's apartment, secured the exits, and established protocols for his movements. You don't answer your door, Morrison said, running through the rules. You don't go anywhere alone. You don't meet with sources unless we've vetted them first. And if we say run, you run. No questions, no hesitation. Understood? Understood. That night, Dylan lay awake listening to Morrison and Keller moving through his apartment, checking windows, monitoring feeds from security cameras they'd installed. His life had become a cage, gilded with protection, but a cage nonetheless. And somewhere out there, the people who'd helped him were facing threats they might not even know about yet. He pulled out his laptop and started making the list Chen had requested. Every name, every conversation, every source who'd contributed to the story. It took hours, and with each name he added, the weight on his chest grew heavier. By dawn, he had 47 names. 47 people whose lives were now in danger because they'd trusted him. He sent the list to Chen, then forced himself to shower and eat, going through the motions of normalcy even though nothing was normal anymore. His phone rang. Unknown number again. Morrison intercepted it before Dylan could answer, running a trace. It's clean. Local cell tower. Could be legitimate. Dylan answered on speaker. Hello? Dylan, it's Adrian. Morrison's hand went to his weapon. Dylan waved him off. What do you want? I want to tell you that you were right to be concerned. My sources confirm the cartel is planning something big. They're not just targeting survivors. They're targeting infrastructure. The FBI field office, the Herald, anyone who helped expose them. How do you know this? Because I've been monitoring their communications since Vargas died. I knew they'd come for revenge. I just didn't know the scale until now. Adrian paused. Dylan, this is bigger than a few hit squads. They're planning a statement, something that will make people afraid to cross them again. What kind of statement? The kind that involves explosives and mass casualties. They want to send a message that anyone who fights them will lose everything. Dylan felt cold dread spreading through his veins. When? 72 hours, maybe less. I'm still working on pinning down the exact targets, but the Herald is definitely on the list. So is the community center where the survivors have been meeting for group therapy. Morrison grabbed Dylan's phone. This is Special Agent Morrison, FBI. Who is this and how did you obtain this information? Tell your superiors that Adrian Vale has intelligence on an imminent terrorist attack. If they want details, they can contact me through the usual channels. But they need to move fast. Clock's ticking. The line went dead. Morrison stared at the phone, then at Dylan. You're working with Adrian Vale, the crime lord? It's complicated. Complicated doesn't begin to cover this. You realize we could arrest you for conspiracy right now? You could, but then you wouldn't get Vale's intelligence and a lot of people would die. So maybe save the moral outrage for after we stop the attack? Morrison's jaw worked, but he made the call to Chen. Within an hour, Dylan's apartment was full of federal agents, all of them listening to the recording of Adrian's call, analyzing it for credibility. Chen looked like she hadn't slept in days. We're taking this seriously, she said. Vale's information has been reliable in the past. Even if we don't like where it comes from, we're evacuating the Herald building and the community center. Bomb squads are sweeping both locations now. What about the survivors? Dylan asked. If they're targeting the community center, they know where the women are. We're moving them, all 17 plus their families, different locations, maximum security. It'll take time, but we'll get it done. And the Herald staff, Marcus spoke up from the corner. I'm not evacuating. This is my newsroom. I don't run from threats. Marcus, don't be stupid. I'm not being stupid. I'm being practical. If we shut down, they win. They silence the press. They prove that fear works. I'm not giving them that satisfaction. Chen cut in. Mr. Chen, I understand your position, but no buts. My staff can work remotely if they choose. But I'm staying. End of discussion. Dylan recognized that tone. Marcus wasn't going to budge. Then I'm staying too, Dylan said. Absolutely not, Morrison said. Our orders are to keep you alive, and we can't do that if you're sitting in a building that's a known target. Then you better make sure that building is secure, because I'm not hiding while my colleagues and sources are in danger. The argument went on for another hour, but Dylan won by sheer stubbornness. He would stay at the Herald, continue working, continue reporting. But the building would be locked down like a fortress. Armed guards, metal detectors, bomb-sniffing dogs, the works. The next 48 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. The FBI coordinated with local police, Homeland Security, and Adrian's people. Though officially, that last collaboration didn't exist. Intelligence came in pieces, fragments of intercepted communications that suggested the attack was imminent but didn't pinpoint when or exactly where. Dylan worked from the newsroom, Morrison and Keller flanking him constantly. He wrote updates on the investigation, coordinated with other journalists covering the story, and tried not to think about the fact that he was essentially using himself as bait. The community center was evacuated without incident. Bomb squads found nothing. Either the threat was elsewhere, or the cartel had gotten wind of the FBI's awareness and scrubbed the plan. But Dylan's instincts told him the threat was real, that somewhere, someone was preparing to strike. On the third night, at 2 a.m., Dylan was still at his desk when the building's fire alarm went off. Morrison was on his feet immediately. That's not a drill. Keller, get Cross to the safe room. I'll check the threat. Wait, Dylan said, looking at his computer screen. This doesn't feel right. The alarm's manual, not automatic. Someone pulled it. Which means someone's in the building who shouldn't be, Keller said, weapon drawn. Move now. They hustled Dylan toward the interior safe room, a reinforced space the FBI had designated as the fallback position. But halfway there, Keller's radio crackled. All units, we have multiple hostiles entering through the loading dock, armed and moving toward the newsroom. This is not a drill. Gunfire erupted somewhere below them. Keller grabbed Dylan and shoved him into the safe room, a converted storage space with reinforced walls and a single entrance. Stay here. Don't come out until we give the all clear. What about Morrison? What about Marcus? We'll handle it. Lock the door behind us. Then they were gone, and Dylan was alone in the dark, listening to the sounds of combat echoing through the building. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The safe room was designed to block communications for security. He was cut off, blind to what was happening outside. Minutes crawled by. The gunfire intensified, then stopped. Silence fell, heavy and ominous. Dylan pressed his ear to the door, trying to hear anything that would tell him what was happening. Then someone knocked. Mr. Cross, it's Agent Morrison. Threat neutralized. You can come out. Dylan's hand was on the lock when something stopped him. Morrison's voice was off, too flat, too careful. What's the safe word? Dylan called through the door. Silence. Then, there is no safe word. Open the door, Cross. Dylan backed away from the door, his heart hammering. That wasn't Morrison. I know you're in there, the voice continued, and I know you're smart enough to realize you can't stay in there forever. But here's what you don't know. We have your editor, Marcus Chen, and in about 30 seconds, I'm going to start cutting pieces off of him unless you open this door. Dylan heard Marcus scream. The sound was muffled but unmistakable, pain and terror and desperation. Stop, Dylan shouted. Stop, I'm opening it. His hand was on the lock when the door exploded inward. But it wasn't an explosion. It was Adrian Vale, kicking the door off its hinges with the force of a battering ram. Behind him stood Marcus and 3 of Adrian's men, all armed, all moving with military precision. Move, Adrian barked, grabbing Dylan by the arm. Morrison and Keller are down. The building's compromised. We're getting you out. What about? The FBI is 2 minutes out. We don't have 2 minutes. Come on. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and chaos. Bodies lay on the floor, cartel soldiers, Adrian's men, one FBI agent Dylan didn't recognize. The newsroom was a war zone. Computers shattered, windows blown out, blood everywhere. They reached the stairwell and descended at a sprint. Behind them, Dylan heard shouting, more gunfire, the building coming apart at the seams. They burst out into the loading dock where a black SUV was waiting, engine running. Adrian shoved Dylan into the back seat, Marcus climbing in beside him, and they peeled out into the night just as more gunfire erupted behind them. What the hell happened? Dylan gasped, trying to catch his breath. They breached the building during the shift change, Adrian said from the front seat. 8 men, all professionals. They disabled the FBI's security, took out the agents, and went straight for you. If I hadn't been monitoring the situation, you saved our lives. I protected my investment. You're no good to me dead. But there was something in Adrian's voice that suggested it was more than that. Something almost human. They drove through the rain-slicked streets, taking random turns, doubling back, making sure they weren't followed. Finally, they pulled into an underground garage beneath one of Adrian's properties. You'll stay here until the FBI secures the situation, Adrian said as they climbed out. It's safe. No one knows about this location except my inner circle. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. How many dead? 4 FBI agents, 6 cartel soldiers, 3 of my people. Adrian's face was carved from stone. And this isn't over. That was just the first wave. They're sending a message. They can reach anyone, anywhere, anytime. Then what do we do? Dylan asked. We send a message back, but not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we plan. Adrian led them to a suite of rooms on the upper floor, clean, comfortable, secure. Guards were posted at every entrance. Get some sleep, Adrian said. We'll talk in the morning. But sleep was impossible. Dylan lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the attack in his mind. The dead agents, Marcus's scream, the feeling of absolute helplessness as violence erupted around him. He'd thought covering the story was enough, thought that documenting the truth would lead to justice. But justice was messy and bloody and required people like Adrian to enforce it when the law couldn't reach. Around 4 a.m., Dylan gave up on sleep and went looking for Adrian. He found him in an office, surrounded by monitors showing security feeds from across the city, a map of Grayport spread across the desk. "Can't sleep either," Adrian said without looking up. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those agents, dead because I pushed this story. They died doing their jobs, same as my people, same as anyone who fights this war. You can't carry that weight, Dylan. It'll crush you. How do you do it? How do you live with all the death?" Adrian finally looked at him, and for the first time, Dylan saw something vulnerable in those cold eyes. "I don't. I just keep moving forward because stopping means thinking about it. And thinking about it means remembering that I'm responsible for everybody I've left behind. So I don't stop. I just keep fighting." Is that what this is? A war? It's always been a war. The only difference is that now you're fighting it instead of just reporting on it. Dylan sat down across from Adrian. "I need to know something. When you killed Vargas, did you do it for justice or for revenge?" Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one to Dylan. "Both, and neither. I did it because he needed to die. Because as long as he was alive, women would keep disappearing. Money would keep flowing. Evil would keep winning, so I removed him. Simple as that." "Nothing about this is simple." "No, but it's necessary. That's all that matters." They sat in silence, drinking whiskey, 2 men on opposite sides of a line that no longer existed. "The FBI will want to debrief you," Adrian said eventually. "They'll ask how you survived the attack. What you tell them is up to you. But Dylan, if you mention my involvement again, if you put my people in their crosshairs, our arrangement is over, and you'll be on your own." "I understand." "Do you? Because I'm not sure you fully grasp what you've gotten yourself into. You're not a reporter anymore. You're a combatant. You've taken sides. And once you take sides in a war like this, there's no neutral ground to retreat to." Dylan thought about that, about the choices he'd made, the lines he'd crossed, the person he was becoming. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm okay with that." Adrian studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, because tomorrow we're going to finish this. The cartel thinks they can terrorize us into submission. We're going to show them they're wrong." "What's the plan?" "The plan is to hit them so hard they never come back to Grayport, to make an example so brutal that no one else even thinks about trying what they tried. But I can't do it alone. I need the FBI's resources, I need their intelligence, and I need you to be the bridge between my world and theirs." "Well, you want me to convince the FBI to work with you officially?" "I want you to convince them that the only way to win this war is to use every weapon available, including me." Dylan knew what he was being asked. To fully commit to this alliance, to become the thing he'd spent his career exposing, someone who operated in the gray spaces between law and criminality. But he thought about the 17 women, about Morrison and Keller and the other agents who'd died protecting him, about all the future victims if the cartel wasn't stopped. "I'll do it," he said. Adrian raised his glass. "Then here's to crossing lines we never thought we'd cross." They drank to that, and as the whiskey burned down his throat, Dylan felt the last vestiges of his old life falling away. He wasn't the idealistic reporter who'd started this investigation anymore. He was something new, something harder, something necessary. And tomorrow, he'd prove it. The explosion came first, not from Adrian's team or the FBI, but from inside the warehouse itself. A percussion grenade that turned the loading dock into a fireball, metal shrieking as the rolling door peeled back like a tin can. The shockwave hit Dylan even from 2 blocks away, a pressure wave that made his teeth rattle and his camera shake in his hands. "What the hell was that?" Marcus growled, pulling Dylan down behind a concrete barrier. Adrian's voice cut through the radio, sharp and furious. "That wasn't us. Someone tipped them off. They're destroying evidence." Through the smoke and chaos, Dylan could see figures pouring out of the warehouse. Not Vargas's men fleeing, but reinforcements arriving. 2 more vans screeched into the lot, and armed men spilled out like ants from a disturbed nest. 20 became 30. 30 became 40. FBI, we have a situation, Adrian barked into the radio. They knew we were coming. We're outnumbered 3-1. Agent Chen's response crackled back. Hold your position. We're moving in now. But Dylan could already hear the gunfire starting, sharp cracks that echoed across the industrial wasteland, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like lightning. Adrian's team had engaged at the main entrance, and the cartel was firing back with everything they had. We need to get you out of here, Marcus said, already pulling Dylan backward. No. Dylan shook him off, raising his camera. I need to document this. You'll document your own death if you stay. Then you better make sure I don't die. Marcus cursed but didn't argue further. He pulled his weapon, a compact submachine gun that looked military grade, and positioned himself between Dylan and the warehouse. Stay behind me. Move when I move. Stop when I stop. You get hit, that's on you. Dylan nodded and started shooting photographs. The scene was pure chaos. Adrian's men advancing under covering fire, cartel soldiers taking positions behind shipping crates and vehicles, tracers cutting through the rain like neon threads. The FBI tactical team was breaching the back entrance, their black-clad forms barely visible as they disappeared into the building. And somewhere inside, 17 women were trapped in the crossfire. Dylan's radio crackled. It was Adrian, his voice strained. Cross, can you see the south side of the building from your position? Dylan zoomed in with his camera. The south wall had a row of high windows, most of them dark. But in one, he could see movement, shadows against a flickering light. I see something, movement in the windows. That's where they're holding the women. The FBI needs to get there before Vargas does. If he thinks he's losing, he'll execute them all rather than let them be rescued. Dylan's blood went cold. You think he'd actually? I know he would. I've seen him do it before. Chen, did you copy that? Copied, Agent Chen responded. Redirecting Team 2 to the south corridor. ETA 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Dylan watched the seconds tick by on his camera's display. Each one felt like an hour. The gunfire was intensifying now, bullets ricocheting off metal, glass shattering, someone screaming in pain. Through his lens, he saw one of Adrian's men go down, clutching his leg. 2 others dragged him to cover. How many casualties? Adrian's voice was ice. 3 wounded, none critical, came the response. But we can't hold this position much longer. They're flanking us on the east side. Fall back to secondary positions. Let the FBI take point. Our job is containment, not assault. Dylan kept shooting, his shutter clicking rapid fire. Every image told a story. The intensity on the faces of Adrian's men, the desperation of the cartel's soldiers, the federal agents moving with tactical precision through the smoke and rain. This was war playing out in real time, and he was documenting every second of it. Then he saw Vargas. The man emerged from a side door surrounded by 4 bodyguards. Even from a distance, Dylan could see he was different from the others. Taller, better dressed, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. He was shouting orders, gesturing sharply, and men responded immediately. Adrian, I have eyes on Vargas. South entrance, 4 guards. Stay on him, I'm coming around. Dylan tracked Vargas through his lens as the crime lord moved toward a black Escalade parked near the fence line. He was leaving, abandoning his operation, his men, everything, and Dylan knew with absolute certainty that if Vargas escaped, this would never end. He'd set up shop somewhere else, traffic more women, destroy more lives. Marcus must have sensed what Dylan was thinking because he grabbed his arm. Don't even consider it. He's getting away. Not our problem. Let Adrian handle it. But Adrian was pinned down at the main entrance, exchanging fire with a machine gun nest that had them trapped behind a cargo container. There was no way he'd reach Vargas in time. Dylan made a decision he knew was stupid even as he made it. He ran. Cross, get back here, Marcus shouted, but Dylan was already moving, staying low, using the shipping containers and abandoned vehicles as cover. His camera bag slammed against his hip with each step. Rain pelted his face. His lungs burned. Vargas was almost to the Escalade. His guards were scanning the perimeter, weapons ready. Dylan needed something, anything, to slow them down. He grabbed a piece of rebar from the ground and hurled it at the Escalade. It clanged off the hood, setting off the alarm. The blaring horn made everyone freeze for a split second. That's when Marcus caught up to him. tackling Dylan behind a concrete pillar just as Vargas's guards opened fire. Bullets chewed into the concrete, spraying fragments. "Are you insane?" Marcus roared in his ear. "Probably. You just compromised our position for a piece of rebar? I had to do something. You had to survive. That's what you had to do." But Dylan's desperate move had consequences he couldn't have predicted. The gunfire drew the attention of the FBI team that had just breached the south entrance. Agent Rivera came around the corner with 4 tactical officers, and suddenly Vargas's guards were caught in a crossfire. "Federal agents! Drop your weapons!" The guards hesitated. Vargas didn't. He dove into the Escalade as his driver floored it, tires screaming as the vehicle fishtailed through the mud. 2 of the guards tried to follow, but Rivera's team cut them down. The other 2 dropped their weapons and hit the ground. The Escalade was heading straight for the fence. It smashed through the chain link like it was paper, metal screeching, and roared out into the street. Dylan watched it disappear around a corner, taillights vanishing into the rain. "Suspect is mobile," Rivera reported into his radio. "Black Escalade heading east on Harbor Road, requesting pursuit units." "Negative," Agent Chen's voice came back. "All units maintain position. The women are our priority. We'll get Vargas later." Rivera cursed but didn't argue. He turned to Dylan and Marcus. "What the hell are you 2 doing here? This is a federal operation." "Documenting," Dylan said, raising his camera. "First Amendment." "First Amendment doesn't apply when you're in the middle of a tactical raid. Get out of here before I arrest you both for obstruction." Marcus hauled Dylan to his feet. "Come on, we're leaving." But as they turned to go, they heard it, screaming from inside the warehouse. Not the screams of combat, but something worse. Terror. Desperation. Women's voices crying for help. Dylan's heart stopped. "The women," he said. Rivera was already moving, his team stacking up at the entrance. "Chen, what's your status inside?" "We've reached the holding area. You need to see this." Rivera disappeared through the door. Dylan looked at Marcus. "Don't," Marcus warned. "I have to. You'll get us both killed." "Then stay here." Dylan followed Rivera inside before Marcus could stop him. The bodyguard cursed creatively but came after him, weapon raised, scanning for threats. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of corridors and storage rooms, lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in sickly yellow. The air smelled like rust and fear, and something chemical Dylan couldn't identify. Blood smeared the walls in places. Bullet holes pocked the concrete. They followed the sound of voices deeper into the building, down a metal staircase that led to a basement level. The temperature dropped. The walls were sweating moisture. And then Dylan saw them. Shipping containers. 6 of them, arranged in 2 rows. The doors were open, and federal agents were helping women out, some walking, some being carried, all of them in various states of trauma. They were filthy, malnourished, their eyes hollow with shock. Some were crying. Others just stared into nothing. Agent Chen was kneeling beside a young woman who couldn't have been more than 20. "You're safe now. We're going to get you to a hospital. You're safe." The woman didn't respond, just kept rocking back and forth, her arms wrapped around herself. Dylan raised his camera with trembling hands and started shooting. He knew these images would haunt him forever. The vacant stares, the bruises, the absolute destruction of human dignity. But the world needed to see this, needed to understand what trafficking really meant. 17 confirmed, one of the agents reported. All alive. Multiple injuries, signs of prolonged captivity and abuse, calling for medical transport now. Dylan scanned the faces, looking for one in particular, and then he found her. Maria Cortez. She was sitting against the wall of one of the containers, her knees pulled to her chest, her dark hair matted and dirty. When Dylan approached, she flinched. "Maria?" he said softly. "My name is Dylan. I'm a friend of Elena's." At Elena's name, something flickered in Maria's eyes. Recognition. Hope. "Elena?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Is she alive?" "She's alive. She's safe, and she asked me to find you." Maria started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Dylan wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but he knew that was a lie. Nothing about this was okay. Nothing would ever be the same for these women. An EMT arrived with a blanket, wrapping it around Maria's shoulders. "Come on, honey. Let's get you out of here. As Maria was led away, she looked back at Dylan. Thank you, she mouthed. He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. We need to go, now. Dylan let himself be guided back up the stairs, through the corridors, out into the rain. The shooting had stopped. The warehouse was secure. Bodies lay covered with tarps. 6 cartel soldiers, Adrian had said over the radio, and 2 of his own men. The cost of this rescue. FBI vehicles were arriving now, along with ambulances and police cars. The area was becoming a circus of flashing lights and official voices and the organized chaos of a major crime scene. Dylan stood in the rain, watching as the 17 women were loaded into ambulances. Some were conscious, others had been sedated. All of them were being treated with a gentleness that seemed impossible after what they'd endured. Agent Chen approached him, her face grim but satisfied. We got them. All of them. That's because of you, Mr. Cross. What you did bringing this to us, you saved their lives. Vargas escaped. He did. But we'll find him. We have his operation, his records, his people. He can run, but he can't hide. Not from the federal government. What about Adrian Vale? Chen's expression hardened. What about him? He was here. Him and his men. They're the reason you had time to breach the building. I don't know what you're talking about. As far as my reporter will show, we received an anonymous tip, conducted surveillance, and executed a raid. No mention of any criminal organizations assisting us. You're giving him a pass? I'm doing my job, which is saving lives and putting traffickers in prison. What I don't see, I don't report. You understand? Dylan understood. It was a deal with the devil, justice bought with blood money and criminal assistance. But 17 women were alive because of it. I understand, Chen nodded. Go home, Mr. Cross. Get some rest. Write your story. And when you do, remember that what happened here tonight was a federal operation. Leave the rest out of it. She walked away before he could respond. Marcus led Dylan back to one of Adrian's SUVs. The crime lord himself was leaning against it, smoking a cigarette, watching the organized chaos with an expression that might have been satisfaction. We won, Adrian said when Dylan approached. Did we? Vargas escaped. 2 of your men are dead. The women are traumatized beyond repair. That doesn't feel like winning. 17 women who would have been sold, raped, and killed are alive and free. If that's not winning, I don't know what is. Dylan wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because Adrian was right. This was the best outcome they could have hoped for in a situation with no good options. What happens now? Dylan asked. Now I find Vargas, and when I do, I make sure he never hurts anyone again. The FBI will find him first. Adrian smiled that cold, humorless smile. We'll see. He crushed out his cigarette and climbed into the SUV. Come on, I'll take you home. They drove through the rain-soaked streets in silence. Dylan stared out the window, watching the city slide past. The same buildings, the same people, the same gray existence. But everything had changed. He'd crossed lines tonight that couldn't be uncrossed, seen things that couldn't be unseen. When they reached his apartment, Adrian spoke for the first time since leaving the warehouse. What you did tonight, running at Vargas with nothing but a piece of rebar, that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably stupid. Definitely stupid. But effective. You slowed him down just enough for the FBI to engage. Saved lives with that idiot move. I didn't think. I just acted. That's what heroes do. They don't think. They just act. Adrian turned to look at him. You're not a reporter anymore, Cross. You're something else now. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Dylan didn't have an answer for that. He climbed out of the SUV and watched it drive away, taillights disappearing into the rain. Upstairs in his apartment, he stripped off his wet clothes and stood in the shower until the hot water ran out. But no amount of washing could remove the feeling of what he'd witnessed. The weight of those women's trauma sat on his chest like a stone. He wrapped himself in a towel and sat at his laptop. His hands hovered over the keyboard. This was the moment, the story that would define his career, the one that would win awards, open doors, make his name. But it was also more than that. It was testimony, evidence, a record that what happened to those 17 women mattered. He started writing. The words came slowly at first, then faster. He wrote about the pattern of disappearances, about Elena's testimony, about the warehouse and the rescue. He wrote about the women's faces, the trauma in their eyes, the way they'd been reduced to cargo. He didn't mention Adrian, didn't mention the criminal assistants or the deals made in shadows, just as Agent Chen had requested. But he told the truth about everything else. By the time he finished, the sun was rising. His first draft was 8,000 words. Too long for a newspaper article, but he didn't care. This story needed space to breathe, needed every detail documented. He sent it to Marcus with a simple message. Here it is, the truth. Then he collapsed into bed and slept for 12 hours straight. When he woke, his phone was exploding with messages. The story had gone live, not just in the Grayport Herald, but picked up by national outlets. The Associated Press, Reuters, CNN. His inbox was flooded with interview requests, award nominations, other journalists wanting to know how he'd broken the story. But the message that mattered most was from a number he didn't recognize. Thank you for keeping your promise. Maria is safe. She's getting treatment. She has a chance now because of you. Elena. Dylan stared at that message for a long time. 17 women had a chance now, a chance to heal, to rebuild, to reclaim their stolen lives. That was worth every risk, worth every compromise, worth crossing every line. His phone rang. Marcus. You need to come to the office. Now. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. The story's everywhere, Dylan. Everyone wants to talk to you, but that's not why I'm calling. Then why? Because we just got word. They found Vargas. Dylan's heart stopped. Where? Safe house in Bellingham. FBI raided it an hour ago. But here's the thing. Vargas was already dead when they got there. Single gunshot to the head. Execution style. Dylan closed his eyes. He knew exactly who'd gotten to Vargas first. Do they know who did it? He asked, already knowing the answer. No witnesses, no evidence, just another dead criminal. The FBI's calling it cartel infighting. Case closed. Right, cartel infighting. Dylan, listen to me carefully. Whatever you think happened, whatever you think you know, let it go. The story's over. The women are safe. Vargas is dead. That's justice, even if it's not the justice we're supposed to want. I know. Good. Now get down here. We have work to do. Dylan hung up and stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. He looked older, harder, like someone who'd seen too much and couldn't forget it. Marcus was right. The story was over. But Dylan knew the truth, knew that justice had come not from badges and courts, but from a man who operated outside the law, a man who'd kept his word and made sure Vargas would never hurt anyone again. It should have bothered him, should have made him question everything he believed about right and wrong, but it didn't, because 17 women were alive, and Vargas was dead. Sometimes, Dylan was learning, the world didn't deal in clean answers. Sometimes justice was messy and complicated and bought with the help of people you were supposed to oppose. Sometimes you had to choose between principles and people, and Dylan had made his choice. He got dressed, grabbed his laptop, and headed for the door. There was still work to do, follow-up stories, interviews with the survivors, investigations into the wider trafficking network. But as he walked out into the gray morning, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the naive kind that believed everything would work out perfectly, but the hard-earned kind that came from knowing you'd fought for something that mattered and actually won. The rain had stopped, the clouds were breaking apart, and somewhere in the city, 17 women were beginning the long journey back to life. That was enough. That had to be enough. The Herald's newsroom erupted in applause when Dylan walked through the door. Colleagues he barely knew were shaking his hand, clapping him on the back, shouting congratulations. Someone had taped printouts of the national headlines to the walls. CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post, all running his story with his byline. There he is, Marcus shouted from his office doorway. The man who just put Grayport on the map for something other than rain and corruption. Dylan felt the weight of all those eyes on him, the expectation and admiration, and it made his skin crawl. They were celebrating him like a hero, but all he could think about was Maria's hollow stare and the bodies under those tarps at the warehouse. Marcus pulled him into the office and shut the door, muffling the noise outside. Sit, Marcus said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey even though it was barely 10 in the morning. You look like you need this. Dylan sat but didn't touch the glass. You said they found Vargas. Shot execution style in a safe house 90 miles north. FBI's official statement is that it was cartel retaliation for the botched trafficking operation. They're not investigating further because they know who really did it. Marcus took a long drink. What they know and what they can prove are two different things. And frankly, I don't think they want to prove anything. Vargas dead is cleaner than Vargas on trial, where he could name names, expose connections, make everyone look bad. This way, problem solved, file closed, everyone moves on. Except the women who have to live with what happened to them. Which is why your story matters. It gives them a voice. Make sure they're not just statistics. Marcus leaned forward. Speaking of which, I need you to write a follow-up. Human interest piece. Where are they now? How are they recovering? What does life look like after rescue? I can't. What do you mean you can't? I mean I can't exploit their trauma for a follow-up story. They've been through enough without me shoving a camera in their faces and asking them to relive it for readers. Marcus's expression softened. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you to tell their stories with dignity, to show that recovery is possible, to give hope to other victims who might be out there. Dylan rubbed his face, exhaustion settling into his bones. Let me think about it. Think fast. Every major outlet wants an exclusive with you. 60 Minutes called. So did Netflix, asking about documentary rights. This story has legs, Dylan, but only if we keep feeding it. It's not about the story anymore, Marcus. It's about the people. It's always been about the people. That's why you do this job. That's why you risked your life at that warehouse. Marcus pushed the whiskey glass closer. But you need to take care of yourself too. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? When's the last time you ate a real meal? Dylan couldn't remember. Go home, Marcus said. Rest. Eat. Process what happened. Then come back and we'll figure out the next steps together. But Dylan, he paused, his voice dropping. Be careful. You took down a major trafficking network, made some very bad people very angry. Vargas is dead, but his organization isn't. They're going to want revenge. The FBI said they dismantled the whole operation. They dismantled the local operation. But cartels don't work like that. They're hydras. Cut off one head, 2 more grow back. You need to watch your back. Dylan nodded and stood to leave. But as he reached the door, Marcus called out again. One more thing. There's someone waiting for you in conference room B. She insisted on seeing you personally. Who? She wouldn't give her name, just said you'd want to hear what she has to say. Dylan's hand went instinctively to his pocket, checking for his phone, his keys, making sure he had an exit strategy. After everything that had happened, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Conference room B was at the end of the hall, its frosted glass door closed. Dylan could see a silhouette inside, someone sitting at the table, waiting. He opened the door. Maria Cortez looked up at him with eyes that were clearer than they'd been in the warehouse, but still haunted. She'd gained a little weight, her hair was clean and pulled back, and she wore clothes that actually fit. But the trauma lived in the way she held herself, shoulders hunched, hands clasped tight in her lap, ready to run at any moment. Maria, Dylan said softly, closing the door behind him. What are you doing here? I needed to thank you, in person. Her voice was steadier than it had been, but still fragile. Elena told me what you did, how you spent months looking for us when no one else cared, how you risked everything to find us. I was just doing my job. No. She shook her head firmly. You did more than your job. You saw us as people, not stories. You didn't give up when everyone told you to. You saved my life, Mr. Cross. You saved all our lives. Dylan sat down across from her, the weight of her words pressing on his chest. How are you doing? Really? Maria's smile was small and sad. Some days are better than others. I have nightmares. Sometimes I can't leave my room. The therapist says it's PTSD, that it'll take time to heal. But I'm alive. I'm free. That's more than I had a week ago. What about the others? Have you been in touch with them? Some of them. We're all in different facilities, getting treatment. A few have been reunited with their families. Others, her voice caught, others don't have families to go back to, or their families don't want them back. There's a lot of shame around what happened to us. People think we chose this somehow. Dylan felt anger rising in his throat. You didn't choose anything. You were victims. I know that. You know that. But the world doesn't always see it that way. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and slid it across the table. That's why I wanted to give you this. It's signed by all 17 of us. Permission to tell our stories, the real stories, not just the rescue. Dylan unfolded the paper. It was exactly what she'd said. 17 signatures, 17 women giving him consent to document their experiences. Maria, I can't. Yes, you can, and you should. Because if our stories can help even one person recognize the signs of trafficking, if they can save even one girl from going through what we went through, then it's worth it. We want to be heard, Mr. Cross. We want people to know that we existed before this happened to us. That we had dreams and families and futures. That we're not just victims. We're survivors. Dylan looked at those 17 signatures, each one representing a life shattered and slowly being pieced back together. This was what Marcus had been asking for, the follow-up story. But it wasn't about exploitation. It was about bearing witness, about making sure these women weren't forgotten once the headlines faded. I'll do it right, Dylan promised. I'll tell your stories with the respect they deserve, and I won't publish anything without running it by you first. Maria stood, and Dylan did the same. She extended her hand, and when he shook it, her grip was stronger than he'd expected. Thank you, she said, for everything. After she left, Dylan sat alone in the conference room, staring at the paper in his hands. 17 names, 17 stories that deserved to be told. He thought about what Marcus had said, that this story had legs, that it could be bigger than anything he'd ever done. But more than that, he thought about what it meant, the responsibility that came with holding these women's trauma in his hands, the obligation to get it right. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. The next 2 weeks became a blur of interviews and research. Dylan met with each of the 17 women individually, always in settings they chose, always on their terms. Some wanted to talk in therapists' offices with counselors present. Others preferred coffee shops or parks, public places where they felt safe. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Promises of legitimate work, offers that seemed too good to be true, and then the trap closing. Some had been drugged, others threatened. All of them had been broken down systematically until they stopped fighting. Dylan recorded everything, took notes, documented the details that would make readers understand the mechanics of modern slavery. But he also captured the humanity, the little sister one woman had been saving money to visit, the nursing degree another had been working toward, the fiancé who was still waiting for a woman who might never fully come back to him. The hardest interview was with a 20-year-old named Sophie, who'd been held for 6 months before the rescue. She'd been so traumatized that she could barely speak for the first week after liberation. But when Dylan sat down with her, she looked him in the eye and said, I want people to know that I fought. Every single day I fought. Even when they broke my ribs and locked me in darkness, I never stopped being Sophie Chen. They took my body, but they didn't take my soul. Dylan had to excuse himself to the bathroom after that interview. He stood at the sink, gripping the porcelain, fighting back tears that wouldn't come. He'd seen too much, felt too much, and his body didn't know how to process it anymore. When he came back, Sophie was still there, waiting patiently. I'm sorry, Dylan said. I just needed a moment. Don't apologize. What we went through, it should make people feel something. If it doesn't, then we're not telling it right. Dylan nodded and continued the interview. While he was documenting the survivors' stories, the FBI was building its case against the wider trafficking network. Agent Chen kept him updated, feeding him information that didn't compromise the investigation, but gave him the bigger picture. We've identified connections in 7 states, she told him over coffee one afternoon. Vargas was just one node in a massive operation. The women you helped rescue, they were being processed through Grayport on their way to locations all over the country. Vegas, Miami, New York, wherever there was demand, they supplied. How many women total? We're not sure yet. Hundreds, possibly thousands over the past 5 years. Most of them are gone, sold, disappeared, dead. But your story is helping. We're getting tips from all over, people reporting suspicious activity, recognizing the patterns. You've made people aware this is happening in their own communities. Has there been retaliation, like Marcus warned? Chen's expression darkened. There have been attempts. 3 journalists who covered the story have received threats. One had her car vandalized. Another got photos of his kids slipped under his door with a note that said, "We know where they go to school." We're taking it seriously, providing protection where we can. What about me? You're the primary target, the one who broke the story. We've had surveillance on your apartment since the raid. 2 unmarked units, rotating shifts. You haven't noticed? Dylan hadn't. He'd been too focused on the interviews, the writing, the endless documentation of trauma. Should I be worried? You should be careful. The local operation is crippled, but there are still people out there who want you dead. People who think that if they silence you, the story dies with you. The story's already out. Killing me won't change that. You're thinking rationally. They're thinking emotionally. Revenge, retribution, making an example. Logic doesn't apply. Dylan absorbed that information, adding it to the growing list of things he couldn't afford to think about too hard, or he'd lose his mind. There's something else, Chen said, lowering her voice. Off the record. Okay? We know Adrian Vale was involved in the raid. We have witnesses who saw his people engaging with cartel soldiers. We have ballistics that match weapons registered to known associates of his organization. Dylan kept his expression neutral. And we're not pursuing it. Officially, because we can't prove direct involvement. Unofficially, because he helped save 17 lives and took out a major trafficking network. Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is just what you need to get the job done. You're giving him a pass. I'm acknowledging reality. Vale operates in Greyport. That's not changing. But after what happened, he's put the word out that trafficking is off limits in his territory. Anyone caught moving women gets dealt with, harshly. She paused. In a weird way, he's become one of our most effective deterrents. That doesn't make him a good person. No, it doesn't, but it makes him useful. And in this business, you take your wins where you can get them. Dylan thought about Adrian's cold eyes and colder smile, about the way he'd executed Vargas without hesitation or remorse, about the deal they'd made in shadows. Have you seen him? Dylan asked. Since the raid? No, have you? No. It was a lie, but a necessary one, because the truth was that Adrian had reached out 3 days after Vargas's death. A simple text message from an unknown number. Pier 17, midnight, come alone. Dylan had gone, knowing it was stupid, knowing it was dangerous, but unable to resist the pull of unfinished business. Adrian had been waiting at the end of the pier, the ocean roaring beneath them, the city lights reflected in the dark water like fallen stars. I wanted to thank you, Adrian had said without preamble, for keeping your word, for not mentioning my involvement in your story. I made a deal. I keep my deals. So do I. Which is why I wanted you to know that Vargas suffered before he died. I made sure of that. Made sure he understood exactly why it was happening and who had sent me. Dylan had felt sick. I didn't need to know that. Yes, you did. Because you need to understand that the world isn't clean. Justice isn't clean. Sometimes it's bloody and brutal and administered by people like me in places the law can't reach. You can write your stories and believe in the system, but when the system fails, people like me are what's left. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it necessary. They'd stood in silence after that, 2 men on opposite sides of a line that had blurred beyond recognition. What happens now? Dylan had finally asked. Do we just pretend this never happened? We move forward. You write your stories. I run my city. And if our paths cross again, we'll deal with it then. But Dylan, Adrian had turned to look at him directly. You're marked now. The cartels know who you are, what you did. They'll come for you eventually. When they do, you have 2 choices, run or fight. If you choose to fight, you know how to reach me. Then he'd walked away, disappearing into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. Dylan hadn't told anyone about that meeting. Not Marcus, not Chen, not even himself most days. It existed in a compartment of his mind he tried not to open. But now, sitting across from Agent Chen, he realized that compartment was leaking. The choices he'd made, the lines he'd crossed, they were reshaping who he was, turning him into something he didn't quite recognize. You okay? Chen asked. You look like you just saw a ghost. Yeah, I'm fine, just tired. Get some rest. And Dylan, be careful. The story's not over just because Vargas is dead. There are still people out there who want to finish what he started. Dylan left the coffee shop and walked back to his apartment through streets that no longer felt safe. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every stranger could be an assassin. The paranoia was exhausting, but he couldn't shake it. When he finally finished the follow-up story, it was 15,000 words, a massive deep dive into the lives of the 17 survivors, the mechanics of modern trafficking, and the systemic failures that allowed it to flourish. Marcus had wanted to run it as a series, but Dylan insisted it be published in full. These women's stories deserve to be told completely, not chopped up into digestible pieces. The Herald published it on a Sunday, their biggest circulation day. By Monday morning, it had gone viral. Millions of views, thousands of shares. News outlets around the world were picking it up, translating it, running segments about the Greyport trafficking network and the women who survived it. The response was overwhelming. Donations flooded into support organizations. Legislators introduced new anti-trafficking bills. Law enforcement agencies announced task forces dedicated to identifying and dismantling similar operations. But more importantly, survivors started coming forward. Women who'd been trafficked years ago and never reported it. Women who'd escaped but lived in fear and silence. The story had given them permission to speak, to be heard, to demand justice. Dylan's inbox became a catalog of humanity at its worst and best. Death threats and hate mail mixed with thank you messages and stories of hope. He read every single one, even the ones that promised they'd kill him, and everyone he loved, because bearing witness meant seeing all of it. The good and the evil, the courage and the cruelty. 3 months after the raid, the Herald threw a reception honoring Dylan's work. Awards covered the wall. The Pulitzer Prize for Investigative Reporting, the George Polk Award, the Goldsmith Prize for Investigative Reporting. Everyone who mattered in journalism was there, shaking his hand, offering opportunities, trying to poach him for their own outlets. Dylan stood in the corner, nursing a drink he wasn't actually drinking, watching the celebration happen around him like he was observing it from behind glass. "You should be happier," Marcus said, appearing at his elbow. "This is everything you worked for. Recognition, respect, your pick of any job in the industry." "I know. But none of it brings back the 2 years those women lost. None of it erases what happened to them. I documented trauma and turned it into accolades. That feels wrong. You gave them a voice. You made people care. That's not wrong. That's essential." Marcus gripped his shoulder. "Stop punishing yourself for doing good work. Those women wanted their stories told. You honored that. Everything else, the awards, the recognition, that's just evidence that people are paying attention." Dylan nodded, but the hollow feeling remained. The reception was winding down when Dylan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Dylan Cross. "Mr. Cross, this is Dr. Patricia Alvarez from Mercy General. I'm calling about Elena Martinez. She asked me to contact you." Dylan's stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's stable. But there's been an incident. 3 men tried to access her room tonight. Security stopped them, but Miss Martinez is very shaken. She's asking for you. She says you're the only one she trusts." "I'm on my way." Dylan left the reception without explanation, catching a cab to Mercy General. The hospital was on lockdown when he arrived. Security guards at every entrance, police officers in the hallways. Dr. Alvarez met him at the nurses' station. She was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, eyes sharp with intelligence and concern. "The men claim to be family," she explained as she led Dylan to Elena's room. "But her file says she has no living relatives in the area. When security questioned them, they ran. We've increased protection on her room, but she's terrified, refuses to let anyone in except medical staff and you." Elena's room was at the end of the hall, a police officer stationed outside. He checked Dylan's ID before letting him through. Elena was sitting up in bed, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes wide with fear. When she saw Dylan, something in her broke. She started crying, not the quiet tears of sorrow, but the desperate sobs of someone who'd been holding it together for too long. Dylan sat on the edge of the bed and let her cry against his shoulder, not saying anything, just being present. When the storm passed, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. "They found me. Even after everything, they found me." "Did you see who they were?" "No, but I know who sent them. Vargas's people. They want revenge." They want to silence everyone who testified, everyone who helped bring them down. You're safe here. The police are protecting you. For how long? A week? A month? Eventually they'll stop watching, and those men will come back. They always come back. Her hands were shaking. I can't live like this, Dylan. I can't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for them to finish what they started. Dylan pulled out his phone and made a call he'd sworn he'd never make. Adrian answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call. I need your help. What kind of help? The kind that keeps someone safe when the law can't. There was a pause. Then, who? Elena Martinez, the woman from the restaurant. Cartel soldiers tried to get to her tonight at the hospital. She needs protection. Where is she? Mercy General, room 412. I'll have someone there within the hour. But Dylan, this puts you deeper in my debt. You understand that? I understand. Good. Keep her safe until my people arrive. And tell her that from now on she's under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Dylan hung up and turned to Elena. Help is coming. Different kind of help than the police, but it'll keep you safe. What kind of help? The kind you don't ask questions about. The kind that operates outside the law. But Elena, I promise you, you'll be protected. These people won't let anyone hurt you. Elena searched his face, looking for reassurance, for certainty. Do you trust them? Dylan thought about Adrian's cold efficiency, his brutal effectiveness, the way he'd executed Vargas without hesitation. Yes, he said. I do. Within 40 minutes, 2 men arrived at the hospital. They were dressed in suits, professional and polite, but Dylan could see the weapons concealed under their jackets, the hardness in their eyes. These were Adrian's people, and they'd come to collect. Miss Martinez, one of them said respectfully, we're here to take you somewhere safe, a secure facility where you can recover without fear. Elena looked at Dylan. Will you come with me? I can't, but I'll check on you, I promise. She nodded, gathering her few belongings. As she was being escorted out, she turned back one last time. Thank you, she said, for not giving up on us. Then she was gone, disappearing into whatever shadow world Adrian operated in, where justice and criminality blurred into something Dylan was still learning to navigate. He stood in the empty hospital room, feeling the weight of another choice, another compromise, another step away from the person he used to be. His phone rang. Marcus. Where did you disappear to? Hospital. Elena Martinez was attacked. She's safe now, but Marcus, we need to talk. About everything. About the story. About what comes next. About the choices I've been making. Come to the office. I'll make coffee. We'll figure it out. Dylan took a cab back to the Herald. The building was empty at this hour, just the night security guard and the hum of machinery. Marcus was waiting in his office, true to his word, with fresh coffee and the exhausted expression of someone who'd seen too many reporters burn out. Talk to me, Marcus said. And Dylan did. He told him about Adrian's involvement in the raid, about the deal they'd made, about Vargas's execution and Elena's protection. He told him about the compromises and the moral calculations and the sick feeling in his gut that came from doing the wrong things for the right reasons. Marcus listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Dylan finished, his editor leaned back in his chair and sighed. You want me to tell you that you made the right choices? Marcus asked. I want you to tell me the truth. The truth is that journalism isn't about being pure. It's about getting the story and making it count. You did that. You exposed a trafficking network, saved 17 lives, and sparked a national conversation about modern slavery. The fact that you had to partner with a criminal to do it, that's unfortunate, but it's reality. So you're saying the ends justify the means? I'm saying that sometimes you have to make choices that don't fit neatly into ethical frameworks. You document those choices. You're transparent about them when you can be, and you live with the consequences. Marcus leaned forward. But Dylan, you need to understand something. The moment you stepped into Adrian Vale's world, you changed. You can't go back to being the idealistic reporter who believes the system always works. You've seen too much, done too much. So what do I do now? You decide who you want to be. The reporter who plays it safe and misses the big stories? Or the one who wades into the darkness and brings back the truth even when it costs him something. Dylan thought about Maria's signature on that consent form, about Sophie Chen's insistence that people feel something, about the 17 women who'd trusted him to tell their stories. "I want to be the one who makes a difference," he said quietly. "Then you already know what to do. Keep telling the stories that matter. Keep exposing the systems that fail. Keep bearing witness. But take care of yourself too. Because if you burn out, if you lose yourself in this darkness, then they win. The traffickers, the cartels, the people who profit from human suffering, they win." Dylan nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but clarity, purpose. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the desk. "This came for you today. Job offer from the Times. Investigative team, unlimited resources, your choice of assignments. They want you, Dylan. The big leagues." Dylan opened the folder and scanned the letter. The salary was triple what he made at the Herald. The opportunities were everything he dreamed about when he first got into journalism. But all he could think about was Greyport. About the stories still buried in this gray, broken city. About the people who needed someone to see them, to hear them, to fight for them. "I'm staying," he said, closing the folder. "You're sure? This is the opportunity of a lifetime." "I'm sure. Greyport is my city. These are my people. If I leave now, I'm just another journalist chasing prestige. But if I stay, maybe I can actually change things." Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Dylan had seen from him in months. "You're either the bravest or stupidest person I've ever met. I'm starting to think those are the same thing." 6 months after the raid, Dylan attended a ceremony honoring the 17 survivors. It was held in a community center, nothing fancy, just a gathering of the women and their families and the people who'd helped them rebuild. Each woman received a certificate of survival and a scholarship fund to help them restart their lives. Some were pursuing education, others were getting job training. A few were still too fragile to think about the future. Maria Cortez gave a speech. She stood at the podium in a simple dress, her hands shaking, her voice wavering but determined. "6 months ago, I thought my life was over," she said. "I thought I'd never see my family again, never feel safe again, never be anything more than what those men made me. But I was wrong. Because there are people in this world who fight for strangers, who see us as human beings, not statistics, who refuse to look away when it's easier to pretend we don't exist." She looked directly at Dylan. "Mr. Cross." "Dylan, you gave us our lives back. You gave us hope. And on behalf of all 17 of us, thank you. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for bearing witness to our suffering and turning it into action." The room erupted in applause. Dylan felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. After the ceremony, the women formed a receiving line, each one thanking him personally. Some hugged him, others just shook his hand. But every single one of them looked him in the eye and made him understand that what he'd done mattered. Elena was the last. She'd gained weight, her face had color, her eyes were brighter. Whatever facility Adrian had placed her in, it was doing its job. "I'm going back to school," she told him. "Social work. I want to help other survivors, people like me who got caught in the system." "That's amazing, Elena. It's because of you, because you showed me that one person can make a difference. That you don't have to accept the world as it is. You can fight to make it better." She hugged him tightly, and Dylan held on, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through together. When she pulled back, she whispered, "I know who's been protecting me. I know what you did to keep me safe, and I know what it cost you. Thank you for being willing to cross that line." Then she walked away, leaving Dylan standing alone in the community center, surrounded by the evidence that sometimes crossing lines was exactly what justice required. The months turned into a year. Dylan continued reporting, continued exposing corruption and exploitation, continued bearing witness to Greyport's darkness. His reputation grew. Other journalists sought his advice. Victims reached out to him directly, trusting him to tell their stories. But he also learned to live with the choices he'd made, the compromises, the deals with devils, the knowledge that he existed in a gray space between the law and the shadows. Adrian stayed in the background, a presence Dylan felt more than saw. Occasionally they'd exchange messages, brief updates, warnings about threats, information about trafficking networks still operating in the region. They weren't friends, weren't allies in any traditional sense, but they'd formed a connection built on mutual respect and shared purpose. And sometimes, late at night when Dylan couldn't sleep, he'd stand at his apartment window looking out at the city and wonder if he'd become the thing he'd set out to expose. Someone who operated outside the rules, who made their own justice, who believed the ends justified the means. But then he'd think about Maria and Elena and the other 15 women whose lives had been saved. And he'd remember that journalism wasn't about staying clean. It was about making a difference, even when the cost was high. 2 years after the raid, Dylan received a wedding invitation. Maria Cortez was getting married, a small ceremony, family and close friends only. She wanted him there. He went, of course. Watched her walk down the aisle in a white dress, smiling like the trauma hadn't won, like she'd reclaimed her right to joy and love and a future. During the reception, she found him standing alone at the edge of the dance floor. "I wanted you to see this," she said. "Wanted you to know that we don't just survive. We live. We love. We build futures from the wreckage. I'm so happy for you, Maria. I wouldn't be here without you. None of us would." She took his hand. "Promise me something?" "Anything. Promise me you'll keep fighting, keep telling the stories that matter, keep being the person who doesn't look away." "I promise." She kissed his cheek and went back to her new husband, leaving Dylan with the understanding that this moment of witnessing joy reclaimed from horror was why everything else had been worth it. The story didn't end neatly. Trafficking networks continued to operate, though none in Grayport. Adrian had made sure of that. The FBI continued to investigate and prosecute. Survivors continued to heal, some successfully, others struggling with demons that might never fully release them. And Dylan continued to write, continued to document, continued to bear witness, because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the awards or the recognition or the moral purity of his methods, but the simple act of seeing people, hearing them, making sure their stories were told. He'd learned that justice wasn't clean or simple, that sometimes you had to make deals with devils to save angels, that the world was complicated and messy and full of impossible choices. But he'd also learned that one person could make a difference, that bearing witness mattered, that refusing to look away, even when it would be easier, even when it cost you something, that was what separated those who talked about change from those who actually created it. Dylan Cross had crossed lines he never thought he'd cross, had become someone he never thought he'd be, had partnered with criminals and compromised his principles and made choices that haunted him. But 17 women were alive because of it. 17 women who'd been given a second chance at life, at freedom, at futures that had nearly been stolen from them. And as Dylan stood at his apartment window watching the rain fall on Grayport, he understood that this was his truth now. This was who he'd become. Not a hero, not a villain, just someone who'd seen the darkness and decided to fight back, whatever the cost. And tomorrow, he'd do it again, because that's what bearing witness meant. Showing up, day after day, story after story, life after life, making sure that the voiceless were heard, that the invisible were seen, that the forgotten were remembered. That was the story Dylan Cross would spend the rest of his life telling. And it was enough.